Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Luis Fernandez. The legal defense for a teen accused of killing 5 people in the 2022 shooting in Raleigh's Hedingham neighborhood has filed a series of pre-trial motions. The trial date for Austin Thompson is set to begin on Monday, February 2nd. Joining me now is WRAL news reporter Shuan Gallagher. Shuan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Now, as a reminder, this shooting took place on October 13th, 2022, starting inside the Thompson family home and ending up on the nearby Neuse River Greenway. He was 15 at the time of the shooting. Thompson faces 5 murder charges as well as 2 charges each of attempted first-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon. So, Shuan, let's focus in on what happened on Monday. What motions were filed?
All right, so there were 6 motions in total that we got to look at today. A handful of them were filed last week, but, because of the holiday, they weren't publicly released until today. Those 5 motions themselves are pretty standard for any, big, felony murder trial that anyone could be a part of. They are things like, directing the court reporter to take notes from the very beginning until the very end. The little nuance there that I'm told is that the court reporter will take notes during jury selection. Not always the case for lower level offenses that might go to trial, but for a felony case, they're going to do that in case there's an appeal in the future. Now, some other motions that were filed as well. One, limiting the display of dead victims' photos. That's something they, again, is pretty standard for cases like this. They don't want to, overuse photos that are graphic in nature that could publicly be seen, because this is going to be a public matter. People could be in the courtroom if they'd like, and for a high-profile case like this, likely there will be. So those photos of the deceased individuals from that day, they need to be used as part of the trial, but this motion is just requesting that they're not used gratuitously or in poor taste, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Another one here, sequestering witnesses. Again, pretty standard. That happens with a lot of large profile cases. Again, it's just so one witness doesn't hear another witness on the stand change their story, and then they both are basically saying the same thing. The defense is asking for this, so if there are discrepancies between 2 different witnesses, they can ask questions there and try to, make the best case possible for their client. The other 2, as part of these 5 that were open today, one was that basically allowing for the defense attorneys to better understand what the state plans to do as part of their case to try to convict Austin Thompson here. And, the defense attorney I talked to said this is just the Austin Thompson's attorney's effort to try to get the state to show their hand. They want to know what the state's going to bring forward as far as prior bad acts that Austin Thompson had in the past that they could use to try to strengthen their case. And then the other one, and this gets a little nuanced, probably a little too nuanced for my understanding, but motion for theory. It's essentially, the defense attorneys wanting to figure out the best way to defend their client. They want to know what the state's strategy is to accuse him and try to convict him in these so that they can best give him a defense. But the one interesting thing, and this came down after 12 o'clock on Monday, and it's the newest motion that came down, it was to restrict evidence related to the searches on devices attributed to Austin Thompson. In plain English, the defense just wants to, prevent some of the internet searches that Austin Thompson did from being used in the trial. And it was really interesting what was in there. I kind of went through and, reflected on some of the elements that the defense were putting in here, just about, that the state is planning to put forward, an argument here that Austin Thompson was interested in mass shootings, that he was interested in weapons and forensics and things that could kind of paint a picture that this was premeditated in a sense. And the defense attorneys for Austin Thompson are saying in this motion that was filed today that this couldn't be further from the truth, that they are, essentially cherry picking search histories from years before, search histories from a 12 or a 13-year-old that were just based off things that he was, seeing in the news, or that he was interested in as like a hobby, that he was watching TV shows on forensics, and that's why he would have been searching for those things. So the defense attorney that I talked to today, which I should say, he has no connection to this case whatsoever. He's just kind of providing analysis on this. He tells me that, this is just an effort to, try to control a little bit of what the narrative could be from the state by, making their job easier in a couple of weeks when they have to go to trial, that they don't need to fight these accusations that they see as not really having an impact on what actually happened back in 2022.
So with these motions, some of them appear very technical, like you mentioned with the tracking of the actual case and the jury selection and all of that. Some of them seem more strategic, like you said. With the defense attorney that you spoke to, is there anything that they mentioned, that they can kind of gleam into the strategy of all of this, into what the defense for Austin Thompson is trying to accomplish with these motions?
Yeah, it is still a little hard to tell, but what he was telling me, his name's Chris Detweiler, a local defense attorney. He was saying, this kind of all comes down from what he's reading from these documents, that, a premeditation for this shooting, or something that, kind of just happened, that is kind of the line in the sand that he's seeing. Based off of what the defense is filing in these motions to try to restrict this access of his internet search histories, Chris was telling me he thinks that, what they're seeing in the evidence that is put forth by the state right now, that he sees the state trying to go this premeditated route to show that, a jury needs to find him guilty of first-degree murder. But the defense is saying that, they don't see this as a premeditated act, that, what they're taking is out of context, that if you took anyone's search history from several years ago, you could paint a bad picture for something that they did years down the line. So it really appears at this time that what they're looking at is kind of, that very fine line of premeditation versus, an act that was kind of out of the blue, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Let's take a quick break there. We'll be right back. You're listening to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Luis Fernandez. I'm speaking with WRAL news reporter Shuan Gallagher. So with this notion of the trial coming up here in a month, Shuan, let's look at the big picture here. How do these motions fit into this case and what we can expect with this trial coming up?
Yeah, Luis, it's kind of one of the final hurdles before they'll actually enter into a courtroom and start picking a jury. Monday was the deadline for them to file these motions, but just to let everybody know, these motions aren't, just set in stone. In a couple of weeks, starting January 20th, a judge is going to review all of the motions that have been put forth in this case right now. And these aren't all just defense motions that are put out there, or, requests from the defense to hold things back. The state's also been filing motions as well. Things like, that they plan on calling a witness who is an expert in digital evidence. They want that to be approved. And, a judge will go over each and every one of these motions. The ones that I had mentioned are, pretty standard, all the way through to the ones that are a little bit more complex about these search histories and how they could be used. And basically all of that is just to set, ground rules for February 2nd when they start, making their selections for the jury, start doing their opening statements thereafter in the weeks to come, just kind of setting those ground rules so everybody knows exactly what is expected during that trial so that they can move forward and either, try to find Austin Thompson guilty, or if he happens to be found innocent, that he is given a fair shot in, trying to be, tried to go through this process for this trial.
Now, this trial, when it does begin at the very beginning of February, it's going to be high profile, just based on, the history, based on what the actual charges were, the mass shooting nature of it. It's not very often that we see a case this high profile in this area. Shuan, I know you have covered something like this in the past. Can you just speak a bit on what we should expect, what you should kind of be looking out for as we approach this trial and once this trial begins?
Yeah, I worked for 7 years in Wisconsin, and part of that, I covered the trial for the Slender Man stabbings, which I think a lot of people are probably aware of. There was an HBO documentary about it, but it was about these two teen girls who because of this fictitious character Slender Man went and stabbed their classmate, all of which they were in their early teens when this happened. And because of the kind of oddity of a story like that, and honestly the tragedy of it all, it brings in everybody. Obviously, local news is going to cover this. We cover a lot more than just this trial. I've been at the courthouse. I go basically once a week, whether it's for an initial appearance or if it's actually for a trial of some sort. So all of the local media will be there, but it's going to bring a lot of national media as well. I mean, this is the highest profile mass shooting in our area in recent memory, at least in my short amount of time here. So in discussing the logistics of this with the district attorney here and what to expect, we're already talking about there's going to be limited room in these courtrooms, and it's going to be packed, and it's going to be from 9 a.m. until 5 every day with a small break for lunch that they are going to be going through this. And we're not just talking 1 day or 2 days. This could be several weeks in the process. And I mean, when you think about it and the complexities of this case, we're talking about 5 people who were killed, 2 people who were injured, that it, took over a neighborhood here in Raleigh. And it wasn't just isolated to a single home. Like you said when you were introducing this, it went all the way into the Neuse River Greenway. So there's a lot of evidence, a lot of testimony, a lot of victims' families who will be there. So it's going to be a pretty crazy couple of weeks here as we cover this beginning to end.
That is WRAL news reporter Shuan Gallagher. Shuan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lewis.
I'm Luis Fernandez. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.